All right, so let's take a closer look at this. Joining me now, criminal defense attorney Paige Pate and Jason Johnson, an HLN contributor and political columnist for the Chicago Defender. Thanks for coming back. I appreciate it. You were with me through that long Zimmerman trial, and I found it interesting that this juror chose to show her face, although she didn't make her name public.
And people are going to find her. I mean, she put herself out there. But I think what's interesting is some of the people who felt that this was a miscarriage of justice, they're going to say, well, why didn't you hold out? Why didn't you stay longer? I mean, you guys made your decision in 16 hours. So I think in some ways this provides solace, and some people are still going to be angry.
And Paige, you could see how difficult it is to serve on a jury and the emotional pain that it causes. And you can also see how jurors didn't quite understand the law. So, I mean, I guess she could have held out, right? But she felt she did the right thing.
Well, it's difficult back in that jury room, and this is why the selection of the jury is so critical in a case like this, especially a self-defense case. I think it is clear that this juror was able to relate to Trayvon Martin more than the other 5 jurors were, but she could not hold out. She was simply outnumbered in the jury room and did not have any good legal arguments to respond with.
You were going to say.
Yeah, and basically you're held hostage at some point, because think about it. If you're the one holdout and you're like, I don't care what happens, I think this guy is guilty. If the other 5 women say, well, we're not going to have a hung jury, you're stuck there. So I don't see how she really had a choice.
Okay, so Paige, I'm going to ask you from a lawyerly perspective, did the prosecution lose this case?
They could have done a better job. I think that's the simple answer. You still have difficulty with the law. I think having to disprove self-defense was a very difficult burden for the state to meet, but I think they could have done things differently. They could have given jurors like this juror some better arguments, go through the law, don't just use emotion, give them something to fight with back in the jury room. They didn't do that.
Okay, I want to switch gears now and take our viewers back live to Cleveland, and that's where Ariel Castro will soon enter this courtroom. Paige, couldn't they testify via videotape or something like that, though?
Not in a criminal trial. You have the right to confront any witnesses against you there in court. And think about the expense of a death penalty trial and the time, the endless appeals. There would never be any closure unless they tried to end it soon. Okay,
so while we await the judge to come into the... All right, let's head back to that Cleveland courtroom. We're still awaiting the appearance of the judge and also the defendant, Ariel Castro. He's the man accused of kidnapping and raping those 3 women from Cleveland over a period of 10 years almost. We expect him to plead guilty today. We expect that prosecutors have come up with a plea deal for him, and they took the death penalty off the table. The proceedings were to begin at 10 o'clock this morning. It's now 10:27 Eastern time, and we're wondering why this could be taking so long. And luckily we have a defense attorney here, Paige Pate, to kind of take us through what might be happening behind the scenes.
Well, a number of different things could be going on. I mean, number one, logistically, you have to get someone who's in custody, in handcuffs, in shackles, up into the courtroom and get him ready to actually stand in front of the judge. The other thing that could be going on is last-minute discussions between the defendant and his lawyers. Do I really want to do this? Do I understand all of the factors that are going to go into it? So it's a complicated process.
At this moment, and Paige Pate, we know that Ariel Castro is going to plead guilty to some 937 counts. He's going to get life plus 1,000 years. The court can't re-indict him for anything. The death penalty's taken off the table. What is the judge doing now?
Well, in every criminal case, the judge has to make sure that the defendant knows exactly what he's getting into. He's going to outline the terms of the deal. He's going to talk about the offenses, possible punishment, possible defenses. Have you discussed all of this with your lawyer? Judge has to go through that in any criminal case, and especially one that's this serious where capital punishment is a possibility.
So as time-consuming as it is, the judge is going to dot all the I's and cross all the T's.
Absolutely, because if he didn't, then Mr. Castro could come back years later and say, look, I didn't know what I was doing, and that could possibly vacate this plea. Let's
talk about the emotion of the case, Jason Johnson, because Ariel Castro said a couple of things where we both raised our eyebrows, right? He said to the judge, I knew I was going to get the book thrown at me. He also talked about his sexual problems. I don't understand exactly what he meant by that. He said, I don't understand some things because of my sexual problems.
Yeah, I didn't know how that affected his ability to read. And I also thought it was interesting. He said, well, I was going to tell the FBI from the very beginning that I was going to work with them all along. This is a different Ariel Castro, and I know he's monstrous no matter when you see him, but He seems almost at peace. I mean, you know, every other instance we saw him, he seemed twitchy, he seemed strange. I think this guy knows he's going away forever, and he'll probably be in solitary. They cannot put him in general population. He'd be killed.
What do you think about that, Paige? Could
Well,
they?
ultimately, that's up to the people that run the prison. If they think he's going to be a risk to anyone else or other people are going to be a risk to him, then yes, they can segregate him. But they won't do it forever. I mean, he's in there for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and he certainly understands that because the judge asked him that a million times, right?
Yeah.
You know, as far as closure for these women, I don't know. It'd be difficult for them to have any kind of closure, even though they know he's behind bars for life now.
There is no. You lost 10 years of your life. I mean, there is no closure. I think emotionally, for the city, for those individuals, there is never a way that you can get past something like this. And for some, definitely, some of their family members, knowing that he's alive, even if it's in prison, will leave them angry for the rest of their lives. And a lot of people still hurt.
You were going to add.
Well, know for a fact that the district attorney would have gone to the victims' families before they approved this deal. That's something they have to do in any criminal case, and especially one this serious. They would have gotten their approval before they did this.
Okay, so the judge is still making sure that Ariel Castro understands this plea deal and all that it entails. But just to recap before I let you go, life plus 1,000 years. The death penalty is off the table. The state can't re-indict Ariel Castro for anything, so they can't come back and say, hey, we're going to charge you with murder now, capital murder charges. They can't do that, right?
No, they can't do that.
So he's going to be in prison plus 1,000 years. So it's suffice it to say he's never going to see freedom.